Our second critical conversation, and welcome everybody. Glad to see you. Hope everyone is doing well, that you and your families are preparing for and working through the holiday season. We're excited for the possibility of sharing some time on Thursday for our Winter Wonderland between 2 and 4, and then our alumni event between 5 and 7. There'll be that gap, but I have a feeling that people will be hanging around during the gap between 4 and 5. So certainly just want to remind you that in order for us to do good planning for food and festivities, please make sure that you register for Thursday's event. I think we have probably over 200 people at this point now. I want to thank Colleen for all of her work on making sure everything is all set up for our inside festivities. And I want to thank Dan Martin and the staff, and the facility staff, because they're out there hanging lights right now and preparing the quad with our fires, and they're not starting the fires yet, obviously, but preparing to rearrange our external furniture. And I don't know that we'll have a winter wonderland. It appears that it's going to be about 60 degrees, 59 to 60 degrees on Thursday. So that sounds like a great way to spend time, whether it be indoor or outdoor. So I hope you'll come and spend some time with each other on Thursday. Again, if you have not RSVP'd or signed up, we encourage you to do that so we can make sure that we have, again, enough food and festivity for everyone. I also want to recognize and thank Trustee Howard, who is here with us today and sharing in these conversations. The trustees have been very engaged in conversations, not only about and supportive about my first year, but about the critical conversations that we're having in what we would consider an integrated view of strategic planning. So as you know, we've developed, before we started this year, in the previous academic year, we developed a set of strategies for a strategic plan. And now what we're doing is we're really trying to go back and put some information from all of you, some of your best ideas, your best thoughts on that strategic plan as a strategic planning area moves forward with that document for a final resolution of the strategic plan that will be at the end of this coming spring semester. So these conversations are, as we've said, critical for us to really hear from all of you, to prompt you with some new ideas, to say something provocative and think about how we might design a future together for the college. I'm going to take back what I said, because I know the last time we were in a critical conversation, we were talking about facilities. And of course, I told the story of back in probably, I think it was around 2015, that I had boldly said that perhaps we just needed one campus and we should sell the Bedford campus. Well, that rumor traveled like wildfire, as you can imagine. People who were actually sitting on the Bedford campus were probably worried that the real estate agents would be coming in the next day to show the campus to anyone that was interested. I can assure you that that is not the case. We've talked in our last critical conversation about the facilities that we have, our tremendous online presence, the fact that we are looking at how we can best make the most efficient use of those facilities. And we've captured that conversation for anybody who would like to view it. And I would encourage you, if you were not able to be with us for that conversation or share your ideas, to certainly take a look at what was shared during that time. And then I've offered the opportunity for people to certainly communicate with me, whether it's one of my open door days that you may participate in, or an opportunity to send an email message with your idea or your thoughts. That's what these conversations are all about, making sure that we can be as inclusive as possible as we look at what the possibilities are for the college. You know that we're at a time where it's very challenging times, but with challenging times come great opportunities. And that's really what we want to focus on today. Today's conversation is about academic pathways, everything from what currently exists to what could exist in the future, what our schedule looks like, how we can best serve students. What are your thoughts about as we roll back into a face-to-face presence, and the tremendous work that faculty have done beyond online, but to really create hybrid sort of possibilities for our students to meet their schedules and meet their needs. What does that mean for the future of the college? What does the future of MiniMasters hold for us and for the college and for our offering? And for all of those of you who support students, how do we see some of these academic programs really supporting the needs of those students. Those of you who talk in advising sessions, career sessions, interacting with students in informal ways to really get a better sense. We started having visits. Arlene and I have visited some classes to talk with students about creating an opportunity for student voice to be heard. And this will be the second topic that we'll be sharing with a number of students as we look to opportunities to do a number of student forums in the spring semester as well, so that we can incorporate student voice into our conversations. So I'm just going to kick it off today and send it over to Provost Arlene Rodriguez, who's going to spend some time along with Judy Burke, who oversees advancement, but of course our corporate and community ed, to talk about some of the possibilities and pathways that currently exist in our credit and non-credit programs. They're going to share some brief information to you, and then we're just going to open this up as we did before for conversation, your ideas, your best thoughts. They're being recorded not only in this video, but they're being recorded by us taking copious notes about your ideas and thoughts about the future of the college. So Arlene, I'll turn this over to you at this time.
I'm very excited. I do see, Beth, you have your hand up, so I want to make sure
Thank you, Arlene.
that
Just for folks that were with us last time, you know, we actually have a form. I'm putting the link in the chat right now. This is a feedback form for Phil's critical conversations. And so afterwards, if something comes to mind that you hadn't thought of, or you didn't feel like your comment or idea could be said out loud or would get lost in the chat, please use this link. Go to the form. Phil has access to these responses. So we'll be sure that they will be seen and read.
Thanks,
Beth.
Awesome. Thank you, Beth. I appreciate that. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm very excited to be able to engage in this conversation. Phil and I have often talked about what the future looks like in terms of what we're offering and how we're offering and what we do offer. Because I think several of us, I'll just share, I'm going to use a statement that was said when Phil, Judy Hogan, Matthew Olson, and I went to NECHI last week. And that was that things that we were doing or planning to do or kind of pacing ourselves to do, COVID and all that came with really accelerated everything at a pace that we really need to continue to keep up with. And the other statement that was said at NECHI repeatedly during our 4 days there was that we're not going back to business as usual. We can't. But I do want to say this. In my time here, and next week will be officially 6 months, Middlesex has grounded very innovative and very stable, and I use that phrase meaning that it's expansive and inclusive, roads to a goal, many different pathways. When we talk about pathways, we talk about all the different ways that a student gets to their credential, gets to their goal. But I also want to point out, and this will come as I show you some research and some data and start as we start thinking, it's more than just one road, and it's more a road that's traveled more than once. You know, many times I think the research shows it's that every 5 years you go back to be re-educated or re-credentialed in something. And I think Middlesex is very well poised to meet current needs and future needs for our students. When we talk about pathways here at Middlesex, we do talk about the academic pathways. And I was just at a wonderful meeting where we, thank you, Brian Wint, I'm not sure if he's in this meeting today, but really went over the timeline for the academic pathways, how they were developed, and how advising in other parts of our campus are working with the academic pathways and how students are responding. And currently, thanks to IR, Linda Heineman, shout out to Linda Heineman, who got me some really interesting beginning data on pathways. We're going to do a deeper dive. We have over 400 students in pathways. Health, STEM, and business are the three primary ones. Health, as you can imagine, is a very large pathway of individuals. These are students who are looking to get into a specific program, may not be there yet, may be a little undecided, maybe need some more of the requisitions, the co-recs for the courses, the prereqs, and so they're in these pathways. And so very healthy and pathways, very strong pathways that allow students that grounding, beginning courses to then move into that particular major, or if they change their minds, those courses are still valuable towards their degree. And these are very strong academic pathways. We're also doing, IR9 will be doing deeper dive into the pathways, disaggregating by race, ethnicity, and gender who are in the pathways and how they are progressing. I believe the pathways were established in 2016. So we've got a fair enough data that we can trend and really look at that. We have academic maps. Each of the programs here have academic maps to let students know what they need to take and when they need to take it. And Judy will be talking about the non-credit for prior learning assessment pathways, which are really critical bridges for our students. These are students who may start in non-credit and then go to a credit program or vice versa. Maybe they start and complete their credit program and then need to come back to Middlesex for additional education, additional training. It is key that we become or continue to become and strengthen our position as the educational center for this community. Again, it's not simply a road that's traveled once. People continue to come back for additional training and education. Hold on one second. There we go. So I call this creative convergence for Middlesex, and people who know me still know that that little bit of the English major who likes alliteration will pop up every now and then. So right now, one of the things I want us to look at is a particular type of what's called a non-degree credential. Non-degree credentials, as you can see here, are those micro-credentials, short-term certificates. Some schools have implemented badges. So you may have heard that some employers really want specific skills in addition to the content skills that students are learning as part of their degree program, and we develop badges for that. So right now we have 26 current college level credit certificates. They range in credit requirements from 16 to 36 credits. Because of COVID, many of our classes are already offered online. So some of those certificates are possible to do online, or part of it to do online. We've talked about in past gatherings, the MiniMaster potential. I'm not going to show you the big charts with all the numbers today, but I have in the past, and one of the things that keeps coming up as I see the trended data for MiniMasters is that they've gone up. We are over 80% more 80% more credits are being registered for in the MiniMasters than they were this time last year. So what we see from student behavior, they're looking at hybrid online, they're looking at MiniMaster, and how do we then respond for that? One of the things we are looking at among my staff are those 26 current credit certificates. Reviewing them, perhaps revising them, and renewing them. How do we make sure that students know that they're available for them both before and after they've completed whatever study? I think that's it's a road often traveled here to Middlesex Community College. Do we start looking at creating new non-degree credentials? Again, partnering with business and industry, looking at micro-credentials. Micro-credentials are usually around 6 to 9 credits. Looking at stackable credentials being those credentials that if a student takes this micro-credential of 6 to 9 credits, and then wants to come back for a degree, those credits automatically are applied to those degrees. And part of a lot of what's prompting this is the funding that is available and will be made available for us to educate our communities post-COVID. And the funding for that, for grants through other sources of funding, is pretty, it's a lot of monies that will be available and that we will be able to compete for. And I think we're in a very good position, but I think we also need to look forward and see what else do our students need? How else do we prepare for this future? Okay, oops. So a couple of things, and I do credit NECHI for this, because there was a wonderful report that someone discussed at NECHI about the role of community colleges moving forward at a time of such demographic shifts. We were very lucky to see Nathan Graw, the author of The Agile College, and the previous book on the demographics of high school, the higher education demographics. And my takeaway from him, especially being at a community college in New England is the need for us to be extremely flexible at how we educate and really look at combinations of things. Some really key points I want to share with you. And one of them is, it's not about just a certificate or just a degree. The power comes in both combined. And in one study that they did, 70% of those who had both an associate degree and a non-degree credential, micro-credential, certificate, badges, said that their education made them an attractive job candidate. And that's compared to 43% who had just an associate's degree. So we see that students are going to be coming back for more education. How do we prepare ourselves to make sure they move forward? And this report, it's a Strata report, and Strata is a nonprofit organization that really focuses on clearing that path from education to employment. In their study, there's some really key takeaways for community colleges. One, those non-degree credentials issued by community colleges in this survey, people said had the highest alumni value rating. They were valued, those credentials from a community college were more valued than the credentials from an individual business or company. So when we hear about Google, issuing credentials or certificates, when we hear about Coursera and all the others that have come, Amazon, that have come into the market, something to consider is that individuals who earned their non-degree credential from a community college said it placed them in a better position than those that they received from a different company or from an outside industry. Community college graduates who combined, as we said, both their degree and their certificate or that non-degree credential, said that they were better placed for a job than if they had had just an associate's degree alone. The longer we talk about the length of a certificate or a micro-credential, it doesn't matter. Although it did, just because it was a longer term here, it didn't necessarily lead to better outcomes than shorter. It really is about what we are offering, how we are offering it. Among non-degree education and training providers, community college rated highest in terms of quality and value. And I think significantly, as we continue the conversations about equity, African Americans, individuals who identified as Black or African American, said that those non-degree programs were extremely valuable to them. They rated it the highest among all the other disaggregated racial and ethnic groups. So I think that's something key to keep in mind as we continue our equity work here at Middlesex. Judy will be discussing the non-credit to credit pathway, a very key bridge for those in our community. And then at the end, if we could just start discussing, as Phil said, what do pathways look like in our future here at Middlesex? So thank you so much, Judy. I'm going to stop sharing so you can take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Arlene. And thank you to you and to Phil for allowing me to be a part of this today. Appreciate that. Not surprising though, because when Phil came here 11 years ago as provost, and first thing he did, or one of the first things, was to invite the non-credit area to work very closely with the credit area and the academic community. So thank you very much. And I want to just mention our team, corporate education and training, community education and training, the work that we're going to talk about, and hopefully come up with some new ideas for. A lot of that emanates out of those two departments. I also want to just mention that, again, Phil's brainchild when he came was to develop the Workforce Development Council. And that's a group of people we meet once a quarter to, talk about workforce development related issues. It involves all of the credit deans, the folks that work in the non-credit space, folks from the workforce development area, our three workforce development boards, career centers, a number of vocational schools in some cases, a number of different individuals coming together to talk about grant funded programs, to talk about work that we're doing in the community, and to try to unearth new opportunities. So as a part of the conversations through the Workforce Development Council, some of what you see on the slide emanated out of that. So on your right-hand side where it says earn college credit for completion of non-credit courses, this is a list of courses when we went back and talked to folks in the academic area about some of the non-credit work that we were doing, tried to look at how much of that work could credit be applied for. So for instance, with the advanced manufacturing, the machining electronics certificate program, we had, the college had received a workforce competitiveness trust fund grant as a part of our work with the Northeast Advanced Manufacturing Consortium, NAMC. And we had been training machinists and electronic technicians through the non-credit area, through corporate ed. When the college implemented through Judy Hogan's area, the precision machining program, we went and asked about an articulation agreement for the machining work that we were doing on our side. And quickly we had an articulation agreement that allowed the students that have participated. And right now we're all of NAMC, we're probably over about 1,000 students. They all have access to those 9 credits should they want to come back to school, want to come back to the college. And that's all over the Northeast region. Also, the nurse assistant training, many of you know that we have done a lot of work around what you would call CNAs. Caitlin Campopiano has taken the lead on that. And again, worked back through Kathy Gailey and the folks in nursing to provide college credit through the Academy of Health Professions for those students that take the nurse assistant training. Same thing with SHRM. Sheila Morin has the lead on that, working with our Society for Human Resources Management Professionals, and again, getting a general education seminar and IDS credit for that. And you can read the rest, but I think the message is that we're trying to look at, in the non-credit world, how can we create those pathways, those on-ramps for our non-credit students to continue on with their education. It's a beautiful first step into the college community. And for those of you that can see this, but this is the non-credit schedule. I'm sure you see it on campus very often. And leaf through it, see if there's something in there that is of interest to you, see if there's something in there that relates to some of the courses that you're teaching or some of the areas that you're involved in, because we're looking to obviously do more of this. On the left side of the screen, you see earn college credit, again, completion of non-credit courses. Lauren Ellis out of Community Education and Training has developed, we've had College for Kids for quite a while, but Lauren has developed College for Teens and College for Parents, 2 really exciting opportunities. This falls under the College for Teens, the career development programs, and she's worked closely with the academic arm of the college to provide non-credit training for youth that translates into credit should they desire to take advantage of that, should they want to. So again, more articulation agreements, but geared toward high school students in that case. So that's just a little taste of some of the work that we've been doing and some of the work that we continue to do. We do work closely with Rob Kalfas, who oversees the credit for prior learning, and we oftentimes call upon him if we're working with an employer that has a number of employees that want to turn the non-credit work that they've done and some of the credits that they've amassed into developing a transcript at Middlesex. So we're always trying to think and be creative about how we can work with employers, work with students, work with our non-credit students to help them in that way. So what we'd like to do now, Arlene and I and Phil and the rest of the cabinets here, is we'd love to hear from you, your ideas. Are there things that you're working on that you could see some applicability in this regard?
And feel free to just put your hand up using the Zoom reactions, or you can type into chat.
And I want to add something, because I think as we move forward, we really need to start, not need to, but continue the thinking of, yes, we may want to offer something, but the question becomes how, when, in what modality. I think these are, questions, especially post-COVID, that really affect can affect the success of a particular credential that we may be offering. So, and I know I just saw Judy Hogan, and I'm not sure if Matthew's here. I can't, a lot of people here, but I do want to give a shout out to them because they're leading a working group on MiniMasters and really looking at that question of how do we schedule these things, because we can offer that, but how do we make sure we're responsive on the scheduling and the modality. So just wanted to add that there. Mute and listen.
So these folks have presented some ideas to really provoke your thoughts about what has existed at the college, what you think needs to exist in the future. Are there some new programs that you are hearing about? Your thoughts about sort of the MiniMaster and the schedule. In essence, the MiniMaster schedule is more like a quarter schedule at the college as opposed to a full semester. But any direction you want to take in terms of discussion of pathways, academic credentials. Part of what I wanted to sort of make sure that you saw is a sense of where we are as an institution currently. We've done some review of academic programs in the past. We need to continue to do that periodically. So your thoughts are really important. On top of that, I will tell you that there are literally daily multiple grant opportunities that are coming through for the college that are federal grants and some state money, mostly federal grants. They're in a variety of different high demand areas. And we were certainly having our grants folks assess those in collaboration with Arlene and Judy to identify what is the best way for us to really position the college to apply for those dollars. We have a special fund that we're working with to really provide additional high demand training to folks. The community colleges and the governor just signed, as you know, part of that ARPA bill was the opportunity for the community colleges to have $15 million spread across all 15 of the community colleges to begin to offer some high demand certificates and training and credentials like everyone else has been mentioning today. As part of our offerings. In the past, we have had to apply for multiple state grants through ComCore, through the workforce development work, through through the work that we're doing with Mass MEP, et cetera. This is the first time that the community colleges, that the presidents advocated for dollars to come directly to the community college so that we would become the first source of training and opportunity for students who are out of work. And as you know, there are a number of situations that we're dealing with, and I can't say post-pandemic, but while we are dealing with the issue of folks who are struggling to identify what their next career possibility may be. So those training dollars are going to be critically important to the college and may help direct us in terms of some areas such as early childhood, IT, the work that we're doing with Google, some of the stuff that needs to happen in our biotech area. So a number of those kinds of technical programs and the expansion of that for opportunities for people to gain actual livable wage and credits towards a career. So I open it up for your conversation. Joanna?
Hi, everybody. Sorry to be late. I missed the whole first part of it. Sorry. I noticed Valerie's question in the chat about winter session being synchronous. So if you do the math, sorry, folks, if you do the math and think about a winter session as 3 weeks, normally in a 15-week, if we do the math for the Carnegie unit, it's 9 hours a week is the expectation, right? 3 hours in class, et cetera. And if you look at that and multiply it times 15 and divide it by 3, I mean, you're ending up asking a student to spend about 45 hours a week. It's literally full time. So to offer something synchronously, even if it's 4, it'd be 15 hours a week is quite a bit of time. And I think people who take the short version, the 3-week course, kind of fitting it in as they can. So to offer something synchronously, if it's not in a particular program, like the nursing has specific things happening, I think, on campus, I think it's hard to do a synchronous in that time period. I don't have the history. Phil, you probably do, to know if somebody offered something synchronously during the 3-week winter session.
And actually, the answer to that is no. The winter session really began as primarily an online session. It was an opportunity to provide not only our own students, but students from other campuses that wanted to access a time that they would be on break. So a lot of folks coming back from private institutions or four-year institutions, having that 3-week window of opportunity. I think that we have done some of this work. The Intensive English Institute spends a significant amount of time dealing with students and in a format that is just hard to believe in terms of the intensity of that work, but it's structured in a very, very different way in terms of how they interact with faculty members, but they're on campus for 4 days a week over the course of a longer period of time. So what Joanna spoke about that's so important is the fact that we are accredited by a New England accrediting body that's a peer, and we were just, that's why Arlene and many of us that were just at NECHI's annual meeting, it's very important. We will have our comprehensive self-study in 2024. So gearing up for that and watching what's happening at other institutions, what's happening and what's changing with the standards, how we best approach that is really important for the institution going forward. So what Joanna has talked about is really about the integrity of credit. The fact that we spend a lot of time counting out your minutes and your hours for your class, that our registrar Kayla and others in the enrollment area watch that very carefully as we build the schedule. Again, it is not perfect. It does not need to be perfect, but we have to show a real integrity to that credit. If you recall, for our last comprehensive study, about gosh, a little over almost 8.5 years ago, that was an intensive area that NECHI was looking at, NEASC at the time, in terms of the credit hour. So it's something that we still must comply with. But Valerie, I think your question is an interesting one, and I think the question about whether or not there's a way to be effective in the use of a winter session in a hybrid format where students prepare to do things and do readings in advance, sort of a flipped classroom sort of approach with more active learning during a 3-week, is something that is a really interesting idea. And it would take a lot of planning on the part of an individual faculty member to do that flipped classroom in that short period of time. Some required readings probably prior to the course beginning, and then obviously opportunities for lab or hands-on or sort of active learning during the time that the 3 weeks. But I think it is not what I would say the proper environment for all students to be effective in, and that's one of the challenges about winter session.
And I just wanted to add to that too. I think we need to be careful with the students, because I had a student take a summer session. Oh, who knows what I did, 5 weeks last summer. And the student was concerned and said, well, why do I have to do as much work in the 5-week as I do in the 15-week? I said, well, we don't put, pre-calculus light on your transcript. I mean, you get the same credits for the same course, the same transferability. It is the same course. And of course, the student doesn't really know that it is sort of tailored to the 5-week, but it's still, there's a integrity piece to it that they have to, I don't want to say cover the material, but they need skills to move along. And if that course is giving them the skills that they need, we have to be careful that they understand that there's an expectation, whether it's in 3 weeks, 5 weeks, or 15 weeks, or 8 weeks, or whatever concoction we come up with, that there is a mass of things that we want to talk about, cover, and express and explain. And so they need to be prepared for that.
Thanks, Joanna. Kim?
Hi, thanks, Phil. For anyone that doesn't know me, I'm Kim Morrissey, the coordinator for hospitality and culinary. And one of the things I've been thinking about a lot is the creation of really like mini certificates within my program. And I don't know if it applies to other programs, but I definitely have a completion issue within my program. Students start and then they leave and they go to work. So I'm thinking if you could create with similar programs a mini certificate, I'm just wondering about the value. Like I have 9 classes in my certificates. If I created 3 kind of mini certificates within that students can build on it, and they can have some sort of credit, some sort of accomplishment along the way, and it might encourage them to keep going. I'm just not really sure about the the financial aid implications or really the value of it. But I just think as far as attracting students, it would be good. I know one of the things I've been in talks with the Mass Restaurant Association about their apprenticeship program. And that's all grant funded. And it's pretty much the same concept, but it would, they find the cohort and the cohort comes directly from restaurants. Restaurants agree to let someone have a day off once a week for the period of the program. And then the Mass Restaurant Association and Mass Hire pays for the student to come and take the classes. So I think you could kind of work it all together, but if we're trying to attract students outside of that program, what would the implications be for them having to pay for this? And really the value, I think, the value internally would be that we get some completion and we get some students, you could do 3, 3, and 3. And at the end of one semester, you have that mini certificate and then you stack it on to the next.
Yeah.
But, it's just a thought I've been kind of tossing around, and I don't know if it would apply to other programs.
No, Kim, it's a great idea. And in fact, I think we need people to continue to think creatively about, students are, no matter how much we may like the idea of a complete associate's degree or a baccalaureate degree, students are chunking a lot of their experiences out, as you well know, and most of our students are part-time. And so the idea of what you're considering, the time is now to sort of experiment with that kind of piece while we have some training dollars to be able to accomplish that. So I'd encourage you to talk to Judy and to Arlene about those ideas. I think the most important thing that we have to think about, which is the mistake that we've made in the past, and I think this is our own perception of how things work, is that we think that giving students something that they can accomplish along the way helps them build their sort of whatever it may be, their motivation. And I'm not suggesting it doesn't, but what I will suggest is that if you can turn those mini certificates into something that allows someone to be employable. So for example, if you were to put together a series of pastry courses that might allow someone to work in an apprentice sort of a way or develop sort of pastry skills specifically in a hotel or a restaurant, there's a mini certificate so I would encourage us to think about employability, which is something, as you know, the Massachusetts community colleges did not grow up with technical programs. They grew up as transfer institutions. We know that most of the offerings that we have are transfer institutions. The only institution that's unique in the state is the one that Arlene used to work at, and that's Springfield Tech. And it is by legislative stature a technical school. It is the only community college that is listed as a technical school. So I think that I think there are things to be learned from that. And as we've said before, there are things to be learned from our partnerships, which you mentioned, Kim. The idea of partnerships in building this is important, not only for grant funding, but as we're trying to develop opportunities for employers, partnerships with individual employers and restaurants, partnerships with cohorts, partnerships with vocational schools. You know the drill, but I would suggest that your idea is a good one. I think I would try and tie it to see if you could rebundle your courses for employability and what we may be able to add that would be of particular interest, and see where that takes us. Like I said, we'll have some money to actually do some experimenting with some of those employability certificates as well. And I think Judy may want to chime in on this one.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that we're hearing in the non-credit area over and over again is micro-credentialing. And we're trying to figure that out too. What are some of the, our courses typically are relatively short, certainly compared to the, to the academic arm, but are there ways for us to even make it a little more bite-sized and have people, as Phil said, to be able to come out with a credential that helps them toward employability? So, Kim, we're struggling with that too in the non-credit area. And then I just want to mention, the regional blueprints. We're part of 3 workforce boards, Greater Lowell, Metro Southwest, and Metro North. The workforce boards were broken up into 7 super regions. So we're part of 2 super regions, the Northeast region and Metro Boston. And in all of the regions, the regional blueprints have an emphasis on advanced manufacturing, healthcare, and IT. But they have just included early childhood in not necessarily all the blueprints, but we're starting to see them in more and more RFPs. So I think, Michelle, you put a note in the chat, and I'm hearing more and more about early childhood and childcare because people can't get back to work because there's not enough childcare opportunities for working parents. So So anyway, if there are any ideas, you know, that you have, we'd love to hear about them. And if there's any thoughts around how some of the work that you're doing could be sort of put into the non-credit environment with the idea of going into the credit environment, we want to hear about that too. But I thought it was important to mention the regional blueprints because I do think it's something that people really do need to know.
Yeah, Michelle, that podcast was excellent, by the way, and I think that I'm glad that you referenced it here and shared it. What I will tell you that is a challenge in the state of Massachusetts, which is not true in places like Florida, California, a couple of other systems where there has been some expansion of mission. And in Massachusetts, we are legislated by sector to identify what we can offer in terms of degree programs. And you've seen that what's happened in Florida, some of the gains in enrollment in Florida have specifically been around this idea that most of their community colleges now have really taken on this idea of very unique and specific baccalaureate degrees that they offer out of that community college, with the idea that students get very comfortable in a learning environment and they don't want to leave. And certainly our faculty have the credentials to be able to offer, we have faculty who have the credentials to be able to offer a baccalaureate degree in a particular discipline or area. In Massachusetts, this is all legislated in terms of what we can offer by sector. That certainly does not stop the universities or some of the other sectors from being a little more assertive or aggressive, shall we say, through continuing ed divisions to offer certificates and associate degrees. So it's a little uneven and in the way it's developed in the legislature. It's funny that we had a conversation with Secretary Pizer and the commissioner, a couple of the new presidents. We outlined this particular concern in terms of mission creep and how this is happening with the universities expanding, and yet the community colleges have always had this particular sector. So we've got mission creep that's happening on both sides. We've got it happening from the vocational schools, and we've got it happening from the university. So we're a little squeezed in all of this, which is why we have to bring as much innovation and creativity and opportunity as we possibly can. But thank you for sharing that idea and that podcast. But I'd encourage that you go to the Department of Higher Ed's website and you can see what I mean about the way the legislation was built in terms of the particular sectors of higher education, about what community colleges are allowed to do, what state universities are allowed to do, and what universities are allowed to do. And you'll see that the universe of what we can offer is rather limited based on the sector that we currently serve. Rob?
Sure. So Judy Burke had mentioned the credit for prior learning, and I wanted to just talk a little bit about the transfer complications when students leave Middlesex and go on to a four-year degree. When students come in with credits from anywhere else, it could be from another college, it could be PLEP exams, it could be military credits from their joint services transcript, AP classes, any of the articulations that Judy spoke about between our non-credit and credit, other credit for prior learning exams we would do. When those go on a student's transcript, it'll say TR. Anything that comes from outside that they don't take in a classroom for a grade is going to go on as TR, and then there'll be a subline under it that will indicate where it's from, all those different sources. In theory, when students transfer, mass transfer should take everything as a block. They complete a program here and go into a matching program at one of the UMasses or Salem State or something like that. In practice, the gen ed blocks go well, but we know we've had on the prior learning assessment council, the CPL council that I have been on for quite a number of years, which is the coordinators of credit for prior learning that do what I do at the other colleges. We've started to meet with folks from the UMass system, and particularly for us, the folks from UMass Lowell. And what the registrars office are looking for when credits come in is they're looking for credits from regionally accredited institutions. So therefore, if it's coming from CLEP or AP or internal articulations, whatever it is, they're not necessarily just going to take it right in, unless they have also determine that they're going to accept those credits. For example, UMass Lowell, there's a page you can go and they'll tell you all the CLEP credits they take. They'll give you the AP exams, et cetera, et cetera. The PLA Council is furthering our conversations, and one of the goals we have for this year under the grant that we've gotten from Higher Education Impact Funding is to further those conversations with the four-year schools so that things can go more smoothly. And we always do tell students in advance when they're looking at getting any of these types of credits that there could be complications and we can't promise transfer. But the PLA Council is attempting to standardize our best practices across the community college system as we have conversations with the four-year schools. And the other thing we want to do is to have the registrars work together to create common ways of coding these on transcripts, because right now different colleges do it differently. Some are less transparent than we are. We're perfectly transparent, which I think is a good idea. So having that commonality will also help in this sort of smoother process of multiple credentials, multiple credit sources, et cetera. So I just wanted to throw that in. Thanks.
No, thanks, Robin. Thank you for your work with this, because our one of our abilities to attract adults, we know that there are, I think that the number is something, it's 430,000 people in Massachusetts who are walking around with credits and no credential. And they've got life experience too. So the one of the key roles that we can play as an institution is to be able to help people achieve that initial first step towards a baccalaureate degree. Now, again, this is not about employment. This is about people who have tried a variety of different higher education institutions or have a tremendous amount of life experience, but no one's had the conversation with them about what that is worth in order for them to be able to advance their own status with a credential or degree. Two things that I wanted to mention, because I think there's been a great conversation in the chat about childcare. I don't want to put Michelle Dobrin on the spot, but I know she and Ellen Grandine are doing some remarkable work in terms of our own ECE program, which has grown exponentially based on significant state dollars. And there are a lot of conversations in the state around the minimum wage for ECE workers, the demand for ECE workers. And in fact, I just had a conversation with Arlene and Ellen and Michelle the other day, and we're looking to sort of create this partnership because we know that there are school systems that are desperate not only for ECE workers, but workers in elementary ed and all the way through the education pipeline, especially teachers of color. We're talking about piloting an opportunity, working with some folks in the Parker Foundation to create a pipeline for teachers of color. I had a great conversation with Superintendent Boyd. So, I mean, there's a lot that's in the process. But Michelle, I don't know if you might be able to fill people in on what you know about what's going on with, because Joanna has articulated this issue of, and so has Darcy, a living wage, a minimum wage, what ECE workers make. I see some ads in the Lowell Sun recently for signing on bonuses and benefits that are different. So I don't know if you've got anything you want to add to that conversation.
Hi, Phil, thank you. EEC, the State Department of Early Education and Care, is definitely working on it. They're trying. The dollars are certainly limited. There is a critical need for early childhood educators right now. And unfortunately, right now, the need is just to get warm bodies into classrooms so that people can get back to work. And Ellen and I, we were just meeting this morning, are working on trying to maintain high levels of qualifications for those who take care of our most vulnerable students. And we're working on advising the state. I think one really important thing to note is that while universal pre-K has technically passed, I really don't see how it's going to succeed without the partner program of free community college, because people need an education in order to be qualified to be teachers and caregivers of children. So there is definitely a need to create a living wage for early childhood educators, but unfortunately, we're not quite there yet.
Thanks, Michelle. Really appreciate that. And I know how hard you and Nancy and Ellen are working on what Ellen has written in the chat about the fact that there's a crisis here. And so many of our own students and everyone we know is challenged with this idea of going back to work, but not having the childcare that they need, especially in early childhood education. So critically important. Thanks. Judy?
So I'd just like to offer up an example of marrying a credit certificate with non-credit offerings that are happening in our in our Launch Your Business certificate. It's one of our entrepreneurship certificates. We've embedded the social media certificate from the non-credit area, from Judy's area. So what we thought was that this was really a critical skill for entrepreneurs to have, this social media expertise. However, it didn't warrant a 3-credit course, and we didn't want to increase the number of credits in the course also. So we looked at the non-credit offerings, and it was really a perfect marriage of providing the skills without the addition of 3 credits or even 1 credit. It really didn't even warrant an entire credit. But the skills were already, had already been developed on the non-credit side. So I would encourage people, when you're looking for content that's needed, and it isn't something that you can find in a credit course, maybe that's already been developed, and you don't want to look at the development of a whole course, look at the non-credit offerings, because there's a wide variety of skills that are being taught in that area that can be married perfectly with certificates in your own areas.
Thank you, Judy. That's a great example. And I think there are a number of these kinds of examples, but I think the idea is, and I think we've seen it in the IT area as well. I talked about the fact that and Kimberly as a curriculum chair knows that we had this conversation with the whole IT area that was very focused on associate degrees and very high level skills in cybersecurity, a number of others. And Nathan and Saeed and Ahmad have done a really good job of sort of creating really high demand certificates that have great integrity to them and are going to be part of the next launch of what we can potentially do with Learn and Earn here at the institution, because we have students that after a series of courses will have the skills to be able to work on a help desk, to be able to assist others, will be able to begin apprenticeship kind of work or internship work in the IT area. And that is another area that is just growing. It's part of the regional blueprint. It is a high demand area. And we have very talented faculty and a lot of established curriculum. And those folks took a really cold, hard look at what they were offering at the associate's degree level, very focused on transfer, and then created those credentials in a series of certificates that have really provided tremendous growth in the IT area. So I applaud them for that work. And I don't know if Kate or anyone else from the IT area wants to speak to that, but I know that we've seen a real response by students to that opportunity to come in, get that certificate, gain the skills that they need, get gainful employment, a living wage, as Darcy has talked about, and then circle back with us to be able to complete their associate's degree and then move on through the trajectory, much like we've done with the biotech program through Learn and Earn. So Arlene, did you have your hand up? I didn't know if you wanted something else you wanted to say.
It was a while back ago, but I really appreciate the creativity that the examples that we're showing, because I think it goes to the point that students come here for very different reasons and for what they can come for. And I think, Kim, your ideas are spot on. It's something that we faced at Cape Cod Community College, where hospitality is such a primary industry. And we did work with the Restaurant Association. I think it's really, I think it's the time where we really need to be creative and look at how we're implementing all these different ways and different credentials to get students to where they need to be. And just as Phil mentioned, my time at STCC, it is the only technical community college, and we legislated that way. And we did work on creating certificates, credit certificates, non-credit certificates as well. But we also looked at, once a student graduated, what might they need to come back and be re-educated, or what might they need to add to their experience and to their learning. So there were some, especially in the healthcare industry, that we did, and it did support students moving forward. And just one last little bit, I know that among the 15 community colleges, there are different sort of I guess kind of priorities, missions that might be slightly different. But I often go back to the point that our very first community college, I don't know if anyone knows the very first one. No? Anyone? Very first one.
Was it Berkshire?
Because I told you, yes, it was. It was Berkshire. Teeny tiny Berkshire. Well, don't tell Ellen I said teeny tiny. But it was, and so why in one of the lesser populated areas of the state did we put our first community college? And it was because of GE. And I think one of the things to consider is that in our DNA somewhere has always been that connection with industry, and it's just something I think we're very proud of here at community colleges to be able to do that as part of our mission. But I'm really intrigued, and I thank you for your chats and the ones going directly to me, because I think it's an exciting time to start looking at all these different ideas. And then also don't forget, like, how do we offer them? We have several modalities. What does the calendar look like? You don't have to answer it here, but just something to keep in mind. I think it'd be great. So thank you.
Joanna, and then Judy, and then I'm going to jump on, change the subject a little bit to MiniMasters for a bit. So Joanna, go ahead.
So I have a question. For a long time, we heard data, come back to us about how terrible we are because our graduation rates are so low, and et cetera, et cetera. So is there some new way that the state might be looking at us and looking at community colleges nationwide, and rather than graduation rates, but maybe employability rates, and helping with methodologies to track that information to show that there is a great success in that?
Yeah, we've made some progress in that area. The metrics have changed. So at one time, community colleges were basically, our metrics were aligned with four-year schools. I mean, we still have the issue with iPads, but there's been some real movement in terms of the metrics, so that we are now looked upon as, counting whether students transfer successfully, counting students at X number of credits that they successfully complete. So it's not just about completion, although completion is still very important. And we can actually now track in the system if a student leaves us early. So in other words, if we've had a student for 35 credits or a year and a half, and we've been successful with that student becomes part of that metric. In addition, there's a metric that really looks, and it's not directly about employability, Joanna, but it is about high demand areas. To what degree do we produce graduates in high demand areas? And those graduates could be certificate or associate's degrees. And we fare fairly well. We have a very active, health program, STEM program. We have a number of, but we could do more in terms of being able to, if we were to think more expansively about sort of the idea that what IT has done with certificates, et cetera. So we are not there yet. The system is not perfect in the metrics that we are judged by, but it certainly is much better, than when I even started here 10 or 11 years ago, with the idea that all community colleges were judged in the same way in terms of the graduation rate. Our graduation rate is still not strong. And that is not about sort of the fact that we do not, I think one of the things I've talked to all of you about multiple times is the fact that we do not have an enrollment issue, we have a retention issue. And that is one of the challenges that we've been talking about. It's part of the equity challenge, it's part of the challenge in terms of the great work that's been done through SOTL for the 100% retention project. It's part of what I know many faculty that are on this Zoom are very committed to. I know it's what the staff, in terms of the work that's being done on the Success program and Noreen's program and other work that's being done across the college, is really focused about retaining as many of those students that we attract to the college in the first place. And so that's part of the dynamic too. But the metrics are better, Joanna. They're not perfect, but they're much better than they've been in the past. Judy?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention there's a report out preparing for the future of work in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and Secretary Acosta came to Middlesex through the Middlesex 3 Coalition a few weeks ago, and talked a little bit about that report. But then Lauren Ellis, who's a program manager in community education and training, took a little deeper dive into it and came up with some areas to just think about. So I just want to throw them out, not for, just throw them out there to think about. It looks like some of the pathways in the future could be around human resources, specialists, generalists, analysts, corporate recruiters, coordinators, sales, any end of sales, account managers, sales consultants, mental health specialists and behavioral health specialists. Those seem to be really keen. If you listen to the news lately, there's a real mental health crisis going on right now with youth and adults. So that could be something we may want to think about. Case managers in general, I'm assuming that those are in the social work category. Respiratory therapists, which I know it's a very expensive program to start, and massage therapy. So, and Phil has talked about that for a number of years. Also in the healthcare field, some of the careers are pathways around orderlies, psychiatric aides, occupational therapy, physical therapy assistants. Again, not necessarily for any particular response, but just to sort of be thinking about that.
Yeah, and Judy, those are great. That list is interesting, and we've started a lot of productive conversation out of the psychology and human service area with William James College, which is one of the primary sort of providers in the state, in their small private institution that does a lot with mental health specialties. And I think that what's interesting about all of this is that we can start thinking about the fact we traditionally think about people who are coming directly out of high school or coming to us with no expertise. And yet some of the best certificates that we offer in non-credit and to some degree in credit are about people who have been out in the field for a while and are coming back for a specialty. So I think about our alcohol and substance abuse certificate, for example. There are ways for us to capitalize on how we and sort of the expertise of our faculty can contribute to the next level of learning for somebody who has a baccalaureate degree but needs a specification that they're really looking for, a set of skills. That's how we think about the cybersecurity area, since everybody that's dealing with all of this within our own issues here in higher ed and outside of it, and certainly our folks in IT know that this idea that cybersecurity is such a huge threat both to our nation but to all of our institutions. So I think your list, Judy, is a great one because it makes us think about, are there areas where we can create not brand new things, but specializations for people who even have advanced degrees to assist them going forward. Rob?
Yes, I noticed in the chat, and there is a concern, and I have heard this, and we've talked about it at the PLA Council about, if we're giving credits for work experience trainings or non-credit programs, non-credit to credit, et cetera, that this will affect the enrollments in the credit classes. And I just want to make a few points about that. One is that the numbers are not huge, but also the data that there's been national studies that show that this actually, by giving people a few courses, and we're not giving people like half a degree, usually it's 1 to 3 or 4 courses at the most, that this is a tremendous incentive for them to complete their degree, to retain them. And there's data that shows how completion and retention rates go way up for people who get these kinds of credits. There's also sort of we may not even get them in the first place if they can't get a little something. And also there's also a competitive thing where if they're not able to get it from us, they might go somewhere else. And then finally, I would say, if students are in a class that they feel they don't need, they're not going to be students that you want necessarily, because they're not going to be happy. Often they don't. These are the, if they think if they already have the skills or whatever it is in the class, they may not be attending. They may end up even withdrawing from the course or failing it because they just simply, it was not the right course for them. one of the areas we do it is in IT, and we have people coming in with these industry certifications, which in some cases they could be teaching the courses. So they come in, they need that academic credential, they do some of the upper level courses, and otherwise they simply wouldn't come to us. So I just sort of wanted for people to see it from another side of that issue.
Yeah, Rob, I think what you've identified is it's a really strong recruiting tactic for adult learners. It's one that we've used, and I'm very proud to say that we've expanded over the years that we're here. I always respect union leadership for bringing up the issue of anything that might take away from credits for people, but most of the time when we're talking about a number of the initiatives that we're involved in, we're talking about people who would have never considered coming to Middlesex in the first place. So this is a very different, and the national data does bear it out that by providing this. And I just want to remind people that and Rob, I don't want to give you a hard time about your language, but we don't give anybody credit. They earn it. They've earned it through life experience. They've earned it through what they've documented. They've learned it through outcomes. It's what they can do, right? This idea that we just made people jump through hoops to get credits. I mean, it's about the outcomes for all of your courses. If any institution knows that, this institution knows that. So if the student through an exam or through a CLEP exam or through life experience can document that they have the skills, that's a better student for any of you in any of your courses. And there is absolutely, Rob is right, it is redundant to have that student take that course again simply because that's the hoop we're telling that student they need to jump through. Because I can tell you there are 6 to 7 competitors right in our very region that will never make those students jump through those hoops. And we've lost students to those institutions. And so I think we need to be innovative, creative, flexible. If there's anything we've learned during the pandemic, and I see it every day by the support staff, by the faculty, by the people who work with students on a daily basis, our frontline folks, this ability to be flexible is really what's going to allow the institution to survive and thrive. And so that flexibility is going to come in a variety of vantage points, and PLA is one of them. So I appreciate you jumping in to make that comment, Rob. Alexandra?
So I wrote this down, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating something someone else said, but I wrote this down because I didn't want to forget. But one of the things that I heard talked about that that I've been actually thinking about for a minute is, I think President Sisson, you had talked about the expertise of faculty and staff providing opportunities for additional learning. And so I have been doing some professional development with some affiliated organizations that I've been a part of for a long time. And I've also just observed that even even us at Middlesex, we've worked with consultants, or maybe in some ways, some sort of like another group to educate us on things like accessibility for documentation in the website, learning about DEI, and learning about anti-racism, which is not the same as DEI. I think that in my mind, at least, or from what I'm observing, I feel like there's opportunity there, especially as an institution, since we're working to kind of improve our campus and our community in these areas, making sure that what we're doing is accessible and trying to figure out how we can adapt DEI as a value for what we're trying to create here for our students here at the college. I think that as we're learning how to do that, we're also improving our skills as a workforce internally. So I think it would be interesting to see, as we're kind of going through this process, if we could then write a course, or like the book, if you will, on that we could then market to partner organizations or corporate sponsors. Because I feel like there is, I was working with the vendor the other day, and they sent a document over, and I was like, great, is this accessible? And they were like, what does that mean? And me coming from the nonprofit sector, my mind immediately went to, I would love to be able to charge you for the answer that I'm going to give you right now, and maybe point you to a resource that would tell you what this is, how to do it, and why it's important. So I just feel like as we're learning and growing ourselves as a community, as staff, as faculty, as administrators, as a workforce, I think that it would be great to kind of take notes and figure out a way to polish that up and then send it and charge other people for it. And I'm not sure, how that aligns with our academic course load, but it just feels like a learning opportunity that we can make money from. And somehow maybe that would be a really interesting thing for us to, again, market the college as. because, we have our, TRHC Institute, and, our president has said that he values these things. And oh, by the way, if you want to figure out how you can be really good at this, or if you want to figure out how your company can get good at this, you can come register for a course and we'll show you how to do it. So that's just an idea that I had.
It's a great observation, Alexandra. And I think, our non-credit area and some of our credit areas have done a lot of support for nonprofit organizations. There's a significant number of them in our region, and they often look to Middlesex and other higher ed institutions to help support being able to make their employees the best that they possibly can. And I'll tell you, the Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation Center that will have sort of soft opening in January, that we've been identified by ANC and you to open with some state money and some grant money. I'm excited about those possibilities, because everywhere I go, all the boards that I'm on, this is the hot conversation for everybody today, is how can everyone, and we are being recognized as an institution that is doing the work. Individuals are doing the work, yes, but as an institution, we're being recognized as an institution that's doing the work. And there's an opportunity to capitalize that and not only serve the community, but also to provide, just like we do for so many other things, reasonably priced services to really assist them. We are an educational institution, and that is what we're supposed to be doing. And so, Alexandra, I think you're onto something, and I think we're in the process of, with the work that we'll be doing through TRHT and the work that Darcy is doing, that we will have opportunities, and we've seen those opportunities from other centers across the country. So I think that that's exciting. I'm just going to pivot now for a moment, because I'm sensitive to our time, and I'd like to throw something provocative out, and no, this is not going to happen tomorrow. Like, I'm not going to sell the Bedford campus tomorrow, which, by the way, I can't actually even do. It belongs to the state of Massachusetts. So just to let you know, can't even rent it out pretty easily. It has its complications, what we found through dealing with DCAM. But what I would say from our last conversation, our last critical conversation, is some great, really creative ideas came from pushing the envelope. And so I'm just going to push the envelope again and say, so what if we, like many community colleges across the country, move to a complete system that the students clearly want? What if we were to only do quarters? What if everything was a MiniMaster? What if everything that we did was on the MiniMaster approach? There have been a number of colleges across the country that have moved to this approach, in terms of allowing students to take fewer courses with more focus over a condensed period of time. And there's actually a lot of data out there that shows that those students, once you have a complete system like that, do much better. So I'm curious about your thoughts, your angry notes, your challenges around this idea of why MiniMaster is growing so rapidly, why this 15, 16-week semester is dying, and I don't want to say rapid death, but it is certainly being challenged across all of our higher education institutions. We know highly successful higher education institutions that run on a quarter system. So I'm just curious about your thoughts. I wanted to throw out something provocative to see if anybody had any thoughts about MiniMasters and whether or not it would work, and how much of our schedule should be devoted to that particular work and completion in the MiniMaster program. Joanna.
Are you surprised?
Nope.
So I have questions. So obviously we'd have to sit down and talk about, how does that work with our contract? Would you have conversations with all of the various, not just divisions, but departments, to see if everything was applicable? And so the way we do it now, right, one runs into the other. Could we frame it where there was an 8-week, a break for a week, an 8-week, and kind of to spread it out a bit? Like, I had thought about that recently. And what would the impact be to faculty members, I guess? How would that, we'd have to really think about how that works with the contract, and what about workload, and et cetera, et cetera. But I think it might be beneficial to do the quarters and get rid of everything else. I know that sounds terrible. Get rid of the 3-week, get rid of the 5, just put it on the rotation. It's just an 8-week continuum throughout the year, even in the summer.
Yeah.
And, put a little padding on each side so people can have some room to breathe.
Yeah, I love the radical thinking. What it does to our contract is interesting because you know that the contract only talks about semesters, right? And so it doesn't really, although, you know, MiniMaster has been built within the confines of a part of term that's called a semester. When we start breaching over that in terms of finding times that don't fit into a traditional semester, I think that's where we run afoul of the issues of the contract. But, you know, I think that part of the work that Arlene talked about that's being done by the deans and some of the conversations that we're having is really, are there some specific programs where this would work, right? So let's pilot this with some of our programs to develop a way for a student to complete an entire certificate or perhaps even an associate's degree in a MiniMaster format, but think about how that's going to, you can already see how students are voting with their feet and it's beginning to change the academic schedule. And there are community colleges and you can look them up. There are several of them across the country. There's some great research done by the Educational Advisory Board and has been done for a number of years now about those schools that are community colleges that have moved to that kind of quarter system. And so there's good data out there about it. So thanks for being provocative with me, Joanna. Nick?
I'll actually let Jackie go first because she's probably going to say something.
Okay, Jackie.
That I was going to say.
Hi. Yeah, speaking from the advisor's perspective, I can just give anecdotal information, which is that I definitely have some students that have taken accelerated courses and report that they cannot do well in them, that they need the full semester. And there are certainly some courses, you know, pre-calculus or whatever, that they get horrified when they even see it. Now, that's not all students, obviously. And my other sense is that part of the increase in the registration for the MiniMasters is late students. So they come in late to us. Now, that may be for good or for bad, however you want to view that, but it's not uncommon that the people that are most likely to be registering for the MiniMasters are the ones who missed the beginning of the semester and now are trying to jump in. So again, for good or for bad, but that's my experience with that. And again, I definitely have had several students that are explicit that MiniMasters do not work for them. Yeah. And there are definitely ones that, yes, oh, absolutely love it, whatever. But there is a contingency definitely that would struggle academically with that pace.
Yeah, well, I think the college would have to focus on how we support students. I mean, we have to be ready to be able to make that move. And I think we've experimented with MiniMasters for a while. I'm not sure we've had a deep and lasting conversation about the best way to support students. And the idea is we have to get our heads wrapped around the fact that students would be taking fewer courses during a MiniMaster.
Sure.
So
oh, absolutely.
Issue, so that, you know, when we're looking at that, how does that really work and how do we support those students? So I would say that it would require a lot more data and a lot more input from students and student voices. It would be a great and very interesting survey for us to do. And it would be great for us to do some comparisons. What I would say is that of the schools that I have heard presentations from around this say that they go through growing pains when they make this kind of a switch to a schedule for those who have flipped it completely. And I think there's some argument to be made that it's a matter of discussing what does the percentage of the schedule look like. But I think what others have talked about and what Joanna has talked about is you having different kind of parts of term that are colliding with each other. So it's hard to be all things to all people when you're doing semesters and MiniMasters. And so it's the idea of, would we be able to focus better as an institution and figure out the best way to support students who in a MiniMaster were taking one course at a time, right? As opposed to, and then
absolutely. And I can
would
say,
have 2 courses.
Yeah, so for example, from a veteran benefit certification perspective, it's easier. If that's what the semester length is, then the qualifications for what counts as full-time shift based on the length of the semester. So it can be an easier. Yeah, there can definitely be easier pieces as well.
Yeah, no, and Jackie, thanks for bringing those concerns because they're very real ones, and I know you get to hear them. So, Nick, you want to follow up with anything that Jackie didn't talk about?
Yeah. So again, I think the non-traditional student likes to look for that method because it is easier for them to focus on one thing at a time. I know we do have a lot of dual enrollment students, so I'm not sure how that would impact them. And again, some of it might be those growing pains and really the change of just perception. The student that thinks, I can't do this, but being able to chunk it up. I know advising is, discussed earlier, how we try and have that conversation of it's the same amount of work, but you're stacking it differently.
Right.
So you're really trying to look at what's the workload that you're expecting. So whether it's for the winter term, a MiniMaster, or however that is. So we're having that conversation, but I think bringing that clearer to students is definitely important. And then just having worked at another institution that had something similar, also when are the start terms, and then how are the courses going to be offered? So knowing, are there going to be cycles where if you don't start here, you don't get that? Or are you behind? What is the prerequisite? So if you need to start with bio, so bio, anatomy and physiology 2, if you start in the semester where they're offering anatomy and physiology 1, maybe there's other things you can take, but is that going to slow you down to reaching those prerequisites for nursing? And then the last piece, just if we do look at the academic maps and see what are those orders, especially if there are prerequisites on things, so that again, if you can build, hey, this would be a great schedule for a student where we can say, and I think IT has done this some, so like Monday, I come to this class and I come to this class. So you only have one day a week that you're doing it. So again, this night or this night, maybe doing the hybrid model where you can condense things. So you're doing 2 classes Wednesday night. So again, it's long, but that's going to work better because of childcare and all these other things that our students are trying to juggle.
Yeah. And Nick, what you're talking about is something that we talk about a lot, is the messiness of post-pandemic, having had so many things online, things changing around, giving faculty tremendous flexibility about hybrid. What does hybrid look like? Is it intense for a couple of weeks and then it goes online? Is it that you're doing one part of the course online simultaneously while you're doing? I mean, there's so many permutations to this, and eventually the dust will settle on this. And then again, we need to keep asking questions about how faculty are reacting to it, how it's impacting workload, and how students are reacting to what they see as their workload. But as I would say, I would encourage us to look at some of the examples across the country where they've made this switch and been able to support students and make that transition, because it would actually be a significant transition. And even if we do it for a few programs, we are going to have to think very carefully about how we support those students and how we provide all of the other pieces that they need to be successful in a much more intense. I mean, I think there's some comment about students with disabilities. I think everybody learns differently. I think the idea of pace is one that we'd have to look at and how it would impact different kinds of students. So all the questions and issues that are being raised are really, really important ones. So thank you. Ashley?
Hi, I just wanted to quickly share a personal experience as a student. Of course, I didn't graduate last semester, so this is like 10 years ago. But it's interesting that so when I took a 3-credit class, for like winter session class at a community college, it transferred fine as 3 credits. But when I took a class at Drexel University, which is known for its quarterly system, 10 weeks, the transfer school, they wouldn't accept it as a 3 credit, saying that you spent 10 weeks there and then they only took 2 credits and that's it. So I had to take like additional classes. So I think some schools, like when they become like known for this like quarterly system, there may be some issues that we would have to work out before we tell students that they will all transfer over.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the interesting thing about, those schools that have done it successfully, Ashley, haven't really highlighted on the transcript what the modality is that the student is taking, right? We don't even have in the transcript the course is online. We simply have that the 3 credits of a particular course have been completed and have been certified for the outcomes based on that particular faculty member. So it is, I think what ends up happening is admissions offices get to know who's on the quarter system and who's on the, so I think that this would be a challenge, but it would be, as you would mention, because we are such a large transfer institution, would have to be a conversation we would have to have with our primary, not only our public transfers, but as many people mentioned earlier, so much of what's out there in terms of transferability now, and the institutions that are interested in our students are all private institutions that will give our students oftentimes a better deal than our publics in terms of the numbers of credits that they will take. Oftentimes they'll take 90 credits, so students can stay here longer. So even though we're not giving them a baccalaureate degree, we have a lot of four-year institutions that are saying, look, just come do a 30 credit gig with us and you finish your degree. So I mean, there's a lot of flexibility out there with the privates that a lot of the publics could learn from, but they are now all part of that system that we are all following in terms of Gen Ed and everything else for Massachusetts. The privates has signed on as well. And we're happy to see that we've got a number of private institutions that our students can choose from. But I appreciate your concern, because I think it's an important question about transferability and the idea of quarters or mini-masters. We've not seen any issues thus far with transferability for any of our mini-masters. That we've not heard a word of it. We've not had any problems with any of the universities, anyone that's transferred. Unless there's something that I'm missing for those people who are more attuned to what happens on a daily basis, we've not seen any pushback based on the period of time. We've not seen it for the 3-week courses we've offered. We've not seen it for summer courses. People are taking the integrity of the sort of the transcript and the degree based on what we state is validated. And that's a good sign for if we wanted to move in this direction. Allison.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Phil, for the opportunity to speak. I'm sitting here and I'm listening to everyone's comments about this style of potential shift in our format and offering classes with the 8-week semesters. And recognizing that it's not for everyone, but a lot of it sounds very similar to what we already have existing with AHP, the Academy of Health Professions, which was Kathy Gailey's area and under the direction of Angel Pepin. And where it's the 8-week semesters, and we had programs like phlebotomy, medical billing and coding. At one point, nursing assistant was included before it moved to completely non-credit. But wondering if that format that currently exists and the students that we've had go through that program, is there any way to utilize that as like a launching off point for, potentially thinking about a shift in this direction later on?
Yeah, I'd say, Allison, there were some things that we learned from the AHP program. And by the way, I'm just going to give credit where credit is due. That started with work that Kate Sweeney did with a Comm Corps grant a million years ago, Kate, right? And I knew you may be here sort of nodding, saying, oh, yes, I remember that, because it was one of those programs that I encountered when I first came to the college, and I went, you're doing what? Because of the cycles of when the courses started. And some of them were off cycle. And when we stopped doing the off cycle piece, it got better with AHP, but we've not, and remember, AHP came through as a cohorted model as well. So it too had some restrictions to it. But I think your idea, Allison, of taking the best lessons that we can learn from the Academy of Health Professions model, because it's all stackable credentials. It's all that opportunity to really utilize, take a student where they are, give them something that will allow them to go out and continue and work almost immediately, and then come back and advance. It's a very powerful model. It's something we can learn a lot from, because our students need to work. They need to make a living wage. They need to get into the workforce as soon as they possibly can. So that's why these conversations about credentials and the way we do business is really important, because that is not going to change. None of that is going to change for the students that we serve. So thank you. Johanka?
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. I actually attended a very interesting model, because I remember years ago, that's how I completed my bachelor's degree. Lesley University was one of the few colleges who studied that. And part of the benefits was completing the degree in actually 18 months, not another 2 years. In the way that it worked, you wouldn't take a break. You go to one set of class to the next, to the next, to the next. So it's a very interesting model. I think just in general, society is moving at a faster pace. So it's not something foreign to our students, but something that comes to mind is our veteran population, how they will do with this model if we go 100% to a quarter system. And then how will that not necessarily affect their benefit, but what will be the implications of getting their benefits, the housing allowance, and some of the veterans' other needs that they get supplement by being full-time students. So those are the couple of things that comes to mind.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And I think the idea of really focusing on it, we've got amazing people in our advising area that have been very focused on making sure that we are aware of when we make policy changes that could negatively impact veterans as well. So I appreciate you bringing that up. But I think you're right. Yohanka, Leslie University has been at the forefront of a lot of this innovation, especially for returning adults. And we've had some great conversation with them recently about partnering with us. But they've been doing this for a very long time. So there are a lot of institutions out there that we can learn from. And again, I'm not suggesting that this is something that we need to think about doing tomorrow, but we do need to think about the impact of what's happening with what we're currently doing with the schedule and what students are choosing. So it's important for us to just sort of look at the data and do some research and make sure that we're moving in the right direction. Jill?
Hi, everybody. Jill Keller, English department. As chair, I'm familiar with how English courses get scheduled and how I work with Matthew. As things fill up, we open new things. And I like the idea of students, as you say, voting with their feet and having the flexibility to react to what they want. However, on the other hand, there's the degree of tolerance we have for, if we follow that model, and I don't know if we do school-wide, it could be that many more MiniMasters will need to be opened and other 15-week courses may have to be closed, but there may be a situation where there's a bunch of underfilled classes. If we are a totally student-driven, if we have a totally student-driven registration model where they're choosing their modality and their time preference, 8 weeks, 16 weeks, it could lead to less efficient class sizes. And I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, I think anytime when you're trying an innovation and you're trying to bring some of it to scale, it creates a whole bunch of challenges. And I think we'd have to learn. I mean, like I said, there are a number of institutions that I know about from EABA that have moved to this almost exclusively across the country. And I think we'd have to, like anything else, we'd have to beg, steal, and borrow all of their best emerging practices about how they made the transition. And quite frankly, I would say it's interesting, Jill, because what you've described is exactly what we've been doing for 3 years now since we started sort of the MiniMaster model. We've been adjusting our schedule based on student demand. We've been using it to our advantage, oftentimes for being able to provide additional courses to students, as what I would say that Jackie says about students who come late. One of the challenges, if you recall, is when we started talking about sort of on-time registration, my goal was that we were not going to make a student who got there in September and was late by a couple of days, that they were going to wait till January to start their semester. So the idea of the MiniMaster, it was kind of born out of this idea of how do we start students so they have a chance to apply for financial aid, meet with an advisor, get their admission stuff done, and get all that work done before they started a course, which is really how we started. If you recall, we started with, it wasn't a MiniMaster at that time. It wasn't 8 weeks. I think we started with something that was a couple of weeks late. I mean, we tried a couple of different permutations of this. But what I'd say is we have a lot of data and we have a lot of experience around this. But I think the transition and making sure that we make sure that students get taken care of and that courses that need to run would have to be part of that consideration. So it would have to be part of the careful planning. But I would say that right now, we're already beginning to see some of that transition. And I see flexibility, like the chairs like yourself and others who are adding sections to a MiniMaster that's come in the second part of the semester. As you know, we have now a significant, and we started MiniMasters, a lot of students wouldn't choose the first MiniMaster. They would gravitate to the MiniMaster that was a second MiniMaster because they were coming late. Now we've got a different rhythm going with some of these students that I think bears looking at, and again, further study, and a lot of, as has been suggested in the chat, some not only some data that we would pull from what we have in Banner and what we have from our systems, but also really doing a deeper dive with students and taking a look at their success rates and where the challenges are. Because I think, again, we would have to make the determination about how we could get our head wrapped around sort of supporting those students. I mean, you all did a remarkable job when we pivoted and we went online. and students had no choice but to be remote in terms of what they were. You all did a remarkable job of getting those students through. And in fact, we had a tremendous effort towards really supporting students who were at their first time coming into an online environment, from Blackboard ambassadors to the kind of support that happened with boot camp and the work that faculty did to really identify how students could be successful online learners. I think it's that same kind of thing that we'd have to bring our best thinking to this to be able to support that. And I think we'd have to create some flexibility in the schedule to be able to make the transition. It's a great question.
Thank you.
Yes, Catherine, that's exactly it. So the idea of block scheduling, and we've tried block scheduling here, but it is that same requirement of sort of the challenges of doing block scheduling. You've got that down because it falls within a block, and there are all sorts of issues with that scheduling. So it's a good analogy. Thanks for sharing that.
Phil, Valerie had asked in relation to something that you were just speaking about, do any of the institutions share student profiles similar to ours?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think we all love to believe that community colleges across the country are so different, that we're all so different. Let me tell you, we are all so similar. I serve on a couple of national boards now. I've been talking to people in Tennessee. I've been talking to people in Idaho. I mean, the student profile is very, very similar. The only thing that you'll find is, there are some folks that have significant issues because of how rural, the areas are that they're in, but we have that within Massachusetts as well. So, I can call Ellen Kennedy in Berkshire and get a better understanding of how they're dealing with some of their stuff for their rural population. But for the most part, you would be very surprised by we have more in common than we have that is unique about us. Other than I would say that most of the community colleges in other states grew up as technical institutions. They have the vocational school sort of strength that's in Massachusetts does not necessarily exist in a number of other states. That's what community colleges do, not what vocational schools do. So it's an interesting mix. Our student profile is really not all that unique, other than the only state that I would say that has some slight differences that I've noticed in some of this is it's Hawaii, and there's a whole other situation based on where they are with the islands and the number of community colleges that are there, and the way they serve their students, because it's set up by statute to be very uniquely designed to serve Native students. So, but other than that, I think the profile is pretty similar. But again, we could do some more research around that.
If anyone else has, anything else you'd like to share, please raise your hand with your emoticon or put it in the chat.
So I'm going to do one more. Oh, go ahead, Kathy. Then I'll be provocative again for a couple of minutes. We'll see where it gets us. Kathy, you have to unmute yourself. I know we've been doing this for a day or two. So
sorry about that. I just wanted to say that in the health programs, I'm not saying this isn't a possibility or a good idea, but it would, in many of the programs, require a complete curriculum redesign because of the way the courses are. They would have to be sort of chunked out separately. So if this is the direction the college is going in, keep in mind that there would be, it would take a while for that to happen.
Well, the other thing that's unique about health programs is they're selective. And so therefore, you actually do work with students in cohorts in a very different way than the rest of the college does. And so I think it would be interesting to talk with EAB and to talk with some of those schools to see, did their health program sort of remain in this same sort of rotation or cycle? Because you're right, and the curriculum redesign would be dramatic. And again, I don't want anyone, like the sale of the Bedford campus, I don't want you to leave this 2-hour discussion thinking that tomorrow everything will be on the quarter system. The president said that this is going to happen in the spring. I mean, I think that it's funny. I love the rumor mill at this institution, but I can assure you it would take us years to make that kind of dramatic transformation, and it would take a lot of good conversation with individual departments and divisions. So we're not going anywhere yet on that one, folks. But Kathy, it's a good observation to make. But I would also say, like I said, that what is unique about your programs is once they're in, they're all cohorted. You lose a few along the way, they get readmitted, et cetera. But for the most part, you're dealing with, once they've done their prereqs and everything else and been admitted, self-designed cohorts that are just sort of moving in a different pace than the rest of the institution. So that would be something that we certainly could take into account. Okay, Joanna, you want to have another comment before I go to my next provocative piece?
Just real quick, I was going to say that we did a really good job, big job years ago with the GPS grant, the complete college, blah, 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 whatever the letter alphabet soup is. But we got those.
It's all guided pathways work. It's all the same.
Yeah, we got those academic maps set up. They're great. I haven't had a single advisee who's actually stuck to the track because some blip has happened or whatever. So they're never on track and they're off term and they're missing courses and whole semesters in some of the newer engineering programs, for instance. And I realize that's very different because there's a lot of prerequisite material. However, there were some programs I think that would actually be very amenable to the quarterly system if it were mapped out properly and students were guided properly and had the people, faculty and designated advising that knew about that particular new program in the semesterized version. I think it could work. And maybe that's something to think about with particular areas where it might be more flexible, fewer prerequisites, and departments that are willing to set something up. And maybe as a pilot, just to see how it works and then grow it from that.
Well,
that's sort of
how brilliant of the provost, because that's exactly what she's doing with a couple of the deans. They are working on looking at specifically talking with some programs that may be able to sort of, so we are talking about looking at this, mapping it out, seeing what it would look like. I think the other thing that I would recognize is that while all of us love those academic maps, and I do love those academic maps, Beth, we've won a number of awards with the envy of anything that's complete college America. I see them, I go to conferences, and all of a sudden I look up and there's our maps. There's that, somebody's stolen, but that's okay. They're not completely stolen. Sometimes they show our examples of our maps with the Middlesex emblem on it. But what I will say is that those maps have served us well in terms of making sure we've been very clear with students, but it's from a full-time perspective. The technology is really what makes of it. If you're a faculty member, you're an advisor, and you're not using EAB Navigate, there are ways to build a plan that has nothing to do with those paper maps that we all love, and I do love them. But I would say that, as we move further into an academic planning mechanism with EAB Navigate and have more people using that really incredible and powerful tool, it allows you to develop part-time maps in a way that allows you to do some really good planning. So if you're not sold on EAB Navigate yet, I'm going to encourage you to take a look, because it's the best way to serve part-time students from a mapping perspective and a planning perspective. So the last provocative thing that I would say, I think I've forgotten what it was that I wanted to say that was provocative. All right, does anybody want to fill in time for 30 seconds while I go through what's left of my brain to ask?
Phil, Valerie just mentioned in the chat
that she found my brain.
We know we need to be planning and on the ground and ready to run for the 22nd century rather than the 21st century. So we have to plan for those careers and their related training.
Plan for the careers that don't even exist yet, Valerie. Absolutely the case. And it's interesting. Okay, so this is the other controversial thing I wanted to say. I'm glad that you sort of tripped my memory a little bit. Some community colleges have moved away completely from the concept of concentrations. You do a liberal arts and sciences degree, and that's what you get. You do a liberal studies degree, but that's only self-designed. So concentrations often create challenges with mapping. And some of those challenges are sort of artificial, right? Because in essence, it's just rolls with. So I think I'll give you North Shore Community College, for example, has pretty much abandoned their concentrations within the associate's degree. So I'm curious about what you're thinking about the pros and cons of a concentration for a student who's not really getting a degree in that concentration. They're just going to go on to a four-year school, and they could still be advised as such, but the idea of concentrations and the challenges with scheduling, I'm just curious about your thoughts. Guess that wasn't provocative enough. Go ahead, Jackie.
I'll bite. So I would say many positive things. I think streamlining would be great. I think that the tricky part would be, what the concentrations help do is make sure that students are taking courses that are most likely to transfer well to a program that they might be going to. So in place of that, I mean, they've got the broad categories instead of the specific courses. So fine, you can do all of, psychology, you can do that as a liberal arts and sciences major. You can do all of the concentrations under the guise of liberal arts and sciences as it is, I think. But the trick would be really getting them hooked up with transfer information early, to be taking the correct courses so that if they did want to transfer into a psychology program, they're good to go. That they're not taking additional courses that won't serve them well once they get wherever they're going. So that would be, I would think it would streamline the process. It would give them more flexibility. There are lots of pros, I think, but it sometimes there's, danger in freedom, right? So, you don't want students taking courses that they don't need. So that would be my concern, I guess. But I think that could be ameliorated with, again, just letting them know that they really want to be talking to their transfer advisor and checking on the specifics of the particular places they might want to go to in terms of what would work for them.
Thanks.
That's all.
Good points. Johanka?
My hand is actually not up. So I'm not sure.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
You
it
haven't
looks like
raised.
It is,
someone-
you're on twice, dear.
There's so many of
Okay.
you, Johanka,
No,
that I'm
sorry.
just trying to respond to.
I
There we
know
go.
I
I don't
have
know
two
what happened.
brains.
Could have been your phone, could have been your other screen. Go ahead, Joanna.
So just two quick examples over my years here. So I had originally a young woman in liberal studies who came into my office for advising and said, well, I've been here 2 years, so I'm graduating. And I looked at her, I'm like, well, maybe not. And then years ago, we had an engineering degree. I just use air quotes, who doesn't see me on a little screen. And basically, they transferred to UMass and had to do 3 years. So I think we have to be really clear about what we provide and what students get when they leave, and how to direct them properly. I do miss the days when students could take like a quirky class just for fun. Now it's all business, nothing for fun. So, so I don't know how that can work one way or the other. It's Winnie posing as Johanka.
Nothing I took for fun for the extra 12 credits that I had for my baccalaureate degree that was fun. It was 12 extra credits that I had to pay for. So I get that, we are a little bit all business. And in fact, you don't get out and work in the workforce without getting all those courses done and having the skills. And you don't get to transfer to your institution that you want with all of the credits and start as a junior without it. So there is a balancing act in this.
Just clarity.
Yeah, but clarity is critically important. And I think a lot of people have focused on that as what we'd have to do in order to be able to prepare students, make sure they had the information that they needed very early on. Winnie?
All right. So I think I have an explanation for why Johanka is showing up many times. I think I may have forwarded her link.
That's
in
exactly
a reply
it.
all.
Yep,
So,
that's exactly it, Winnie. I changed your name for you.
Yes.
So many
okay.
people are masquerading as Johanka today. That's terrific.
Yeah. Many people from
the more
advice.
Johankas, the better.
Yep, a lot of brains.
That's it.
So my comment to what you're saying is, I think we already have like the foundations of what you're thinking about, because we already have is it the 8 pathways that undecided students go into. So those could form the foundation from which students can come in as general studies, but then students would select the 7 or 8 different pathways so that we are able to at least help them identify a path. But one of the things that would require, and it's what Jackie talked about, is advisors and anyone advising students we would need to ramp up and increase professional development in terms of transfer. So we would need to have a lot more people knowledgeable, more deeply knowledgeable, probably Jane Fain level of knowledgeable and Nick level knowledgeable, of transfer in order to be able to effectively help students be able to select appropriate classes. Because if I don't have a sense of what UMass Amherst would want a student in plant science program to take, or the difference between UMass Lowell's and UMass Amherst's environmental science programs, then I wouldn't know how to advise a student who says they want to go into STEM. So we would need to really increase professional development for staff in terms of transfer. But then I feel like we already have the foundations through the pathways to be able to actually do that.
No, that's a great comment, Winnie. And I know I've maybe scared people, but I gave advisors real job security in the fact that in order to navigate the system, everybody would have to be helping people. But I think it's just an interesting idea that, and I think about it from a scheduling perspective. So when I think about what Jill and other department chairs have to do when they're challenged with creating, sort of dealing with the maps, making sure that students have the courses that they need. When was the last time we offered this elective that has to run in this cycle? When we see students that show up and say, hey, I need this particular course. So I think we've done a fairly good job with that. But I think what I've seen as schools have condensed sort of their schedule, and certainly what North Shore has been struggling with, is this idea is they have their liberal arts and sciences degree, and then it's a better sort of scheduling pattern for electives, et cetera. But that's a whole other conversation for another day. Okay, I don't know that I have anything else provocative to say. I'm not selling any campuses. I'm not selling any programs at this point. But I do want to thank you all for your candor about a lot of this. Oh, Hallie asked a question, and I don't know if I have anyone. I don't know if I have Joe Patuto or anyone from IT. I don't know if I have Matthew Olson. They're kind of the dynamic duo dealing with the HyFlex equipment that we are waiting for, but I do not believe anybody know.
Yeah,
anything?
so Phil, I'm here, and it's we're at least a trio. Oh, I don't. Did I interrupt Joe? Somebody who knows more than me.
No, I don't think he's here right
okay.
now, Matthew.
So it's
nobody knows
trio,
more than you,
probably
Matthew. Just tell us what you know.
Sure. What I know is that Peter Shea, myself, Donna Maturi in the library, and many others involved, and Joe Patuto has been leading the connection with the vendor, who has been doing fantastic work, as has our own facilities folks, getting everything in place. And LC 213, I believe, is completely finished as a high-tech, as a HyFlex classroom. And my understanding is that by the end of the month, the rest of the rooms will be completed. Hopefully, we're not still caught in some of that supply chain issue that delayed some of the equipment, but I believe we're forecasting having it done by the end of the month, and then trying to do some additional training and a soft pilot in the spring term.
Great, that's perfect. Thank you, Matthew and Hallie. Just get to Peter so you and your faculty can be the first lined up for training, because I know you've been waiting for that opportunity, because I know you guys have really talked about how you can offer paralegal in that format. So, but thanks, Matthew. That's really appreciate that. It is much better news than I expected, considering we have had challenges not only with the vendor, but with the supply chain. I think people are going to be very pleasantly surprised and pleased with the technology. And then, we have plans once we've finished those particular classrooms, as we talk about some of the work that gets done with Classroom Refresh. How do we expand some of the HyFlex classrooms once we see what their usage is like? So thank you for that. It's 3:57. That means it's happy hour somewhere. And I just wanted to thank you all for your time this afternoon. I want to thank Arlene and Judy for really starting us off and really being great thought partners about how credentials are part of the future of the college. And I want to thank you for all of your ideas, your thoughts, your candor, your cautions as we start thinking about things for the future. All of these things, as I said, are going to be gathered and incorporated in some fashion as we look at some of the things that we have to further explore in the strategic plan to really continue to serve our students the best that we possibly can. Not exactly sure what our February topic will be on February 3rd, so we're still cooking that one up. But I can tell you that in March, we're going to be talking a lot about the redesign of the website. finally, the work that needs to be done for redesign for the web, and the project that will be, you know, one of those projects that's larger than you ever wanted to be, but please come with all your thoughts. And we'll get out to you about the February date. That's February 3rd, March 3rd for the next Critical Conversations. As always, I thank you for your time. I know how valuable it is. I can't tell you how important it is to have your input. I look forward to seeing all of you in your bathing suits on Thursday at the Winter Wonderland. They're putting the heaters out there now and the fire, so it should be really interesting. I'm thinking we should get a couple of kiddie swimming pools, but please come join us, spend some time with colleagues, and if you have not registered, please make sure you do, so that there's a glass of wine and a cookie for you on Thursday when we all gather. So have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you so much for all your time. And Beth, as always, thank you for moderating and keeping us on the straight and narrow in terms of time and making sure we recognize everybody. This will be captured, and we'll send this critical conversation out along with our previous critical conversation to an email to all of you so that you have access to it. Thank you very much for your time. Have a great evening. We'll see you on Thursday, if not before.